Hi, I'm Matt,
And I'm James.
and welcome to another episode of This Week in Metropolis. On this episode, which is the first episode of season 7, we have Patrick Hickey Jr. with us, who is an author, journalist, and also a published voiceover artist in games as well. And he has a huge collection of games, over 3,000 at the moment. So, look forward to speaking to him.
Yeah, and before we get into this first episode of season 7, we just want to say thank you to everyone who takes the time to listen to our show, watch our show, or even just follow our accounts on social. So thanks for following, keep supporting us, and tell your friends about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to This Week in Metropolis.
Welcome to another episode of This Week in Metropolis. We are back for season 7, and we're privileged to be joined. Our first guest of the new series is Patrick Hickey Jr. Patrick, how you doing?
What's up, guys? Happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Patrick, for those that aren't aware of you and your work, can you give us a little bit of an introduction to who you are?
Sure. I am the author of the Minds Behind the Games book series. I interview video game developers from the beginning of the industry's history to today. I'm also the author of the Conjury comic book. I'm also a voice actor. Been in about 5 published games, about 5 more coming out. I've been a college professor for 15 years. The assistant director of the journalism program at Kingsborough Community College in Brooklyn, New York. I write for Old School Gamer magazine. I was just their featured writer of the month. That was pretty cool. I'm a former NBC editor. So yeah, I've been around.
When do you have the time to do it? You're a busy man.
Yeah, my daughter is like looking at me right now. So she's kind of like,
Another interview.
I rarely get to sleep. Like, it's crazy. I have 2 little ones too, and a wife, and so it's just, I tell my students all the time, it's like, you want to accomplish things, you gotta sleep less. So I'm 37 and I got a nice collection here. So
we can relate. It's fine.
Absolutely, that's the price you pay. So I'll deal with it. So
where did it all start, Pat?
So when I was 18, the initial goal was to be a professional hockey player. That's what I always wanted to do. I'm like 6'3" and a half, 6'4". I was about 225 pounds at the time. I was a pretty good hockey player. I was going to take a year off before I went from high school to college, get in even better shape, and then try and walk on to like a Division 3, Division 2 hockey program. And everything was going as planned. And then I got in a car accident and messed up my back pretty bad. So hockey was pretty much out of the window. That window of opportunity was gone. So for probably like a year and a half, I played a ton of video games. I read a lot. I was in a couple of bands. I entertained plenty of women. I just had fun. It was probably like one of the first times in my life. Like, I probably had a lot of fun because I'm a twin. I'm the older brother. My brother is like Kramer from Seinfeld. He's just a maniac. And I was always like in protect mode, Yeah. And by the time I was 18, he was moved out. So I like had a bedroom to myself for like the first time, and I just got to have a lot of fun. And then I remember one night, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was like watching like Batman the Animated Series on DVD, and my father walks in and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, what do you think it is I'm doing?
Yeah.
I'm watching TV, I'm hanging out. And he goes, no, like with your life. I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, well, you better figure it out soon because you're not staying here if this is like what it's going to be like. So it was just like, the next day I applied for college. I ended up talking to the head of the journalism program at the college. He was the one that registered me. 6 months later, I was editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. That summer, I was covering professional baseball and minor league baseball. And then I just, now I teach at that college. I've taught there for 15 years. So And then it's just like, as other opportunities would come, writing for other newspapers, working at NBC for 2.5 years, covering 3 Olympics, presidential election, tons of cool stuff. Started my own site. I'm the editor-in-chief of reviewfix.com as well. And that's just, as stuff comes, I just, handle it and try and do the best that I can in whatever I'm doing.
Fantastic. And how does gaming fit into it all? What's your sort of early experiences of gaming?
So I grew up. I'm not sure if the British have like a term, but we were like white trash when I was a kid.
Yeah.
We did not have a lot of money. It was like hot dogs and macaroni and cheese for dinner, like every night. And but it's like if you had a video game console in your house, you weren't that poor.
Yeah.
It was like a status symbol.
Yeah.
It's like if you had a computer, you were great.
Yeah.
But if you had like a Nintendo, an NES, you were okay. If you had an Atari 2600, people would be like, "Yo, are you poor?" But if you had a Nintendo Entertainment System or a Sega Genesis, and then later a Super Nintendo and so on and so on, you were okay. So my father always made sure that we had a video game console in the house. So like I was exposed to like Mario Brothers, RBI Baseball, ice hockey, pro wrestling, Tech Mobile, all the classics. So I always played them. And then it just felt super natural to me that when I started writing, that I would want to write about video games.
Yeah.
So when I became the editor-in-chief of my first college newspaper, I started sending letters to video game companies, like Atlas, Tecmo, send me games so I can review them. And they did.
And they did.
And they did. Wow. So it's like, I remember getting like copies of like Steambot Chronicles and like Persona for free. And it was just like, so all I have to do is write about these games, send you the coverage, and you'll keep sending me games. And that's like, so then when I left that college newspaper, when I graduated, I wrote them again. And I'm like, I'm at another college now. I'll cover your company's games at this college's paper.
Yeah.
And they kept sending me games. And then when I started my own site, I told them now I have my own site, and then it's just so funny because like Atlas, I'm sure you guys know Atlas merged with Sega a couple of years ago. So I just finished the minds behind Sega games, and Sega really helped me a lot, like get a couple of sources that I don't think anyone had any business getting. So it's just kind of like I've managed to have a relationship with like, there you go, with Sega for like 17 years. So it's pretty wild. So it's just like, as long as I've written journalism, it's like video games, comic books, music, theater, they've always like found a way to like be the things that I wanted to write about the most.
Yeah. And the minds behind series of books that you've done, how many of them have you done there? Is that your 4th or 5th?
So 4 are out right now. The Minds Behind the Games is the first one. Then the Minds Behind the Adventure Games, the Minds Behind the Sports Games, and the Minds Behind the Shooter Games just came out. The Minds Behind Sega Genesis is next. That's this holiday season. The Minds Behind Sony PlayStation Games, I've literally just sent in yesterday to the publisher. So that's going to be out next spring. And I'm currently working on a Minds Behind the Sony PlayStation 2 game. So that would be book 7. So
nice.
Yeah.
That's
And
really cool.
what inspired you to do that? Was that really just from the relationships you had sort of in place?
Spite? No. In a weird way, kind of spite with other people, spite with myself. Probably with myself, the biggest reason. So this is the thing. I was 33. My wife was pregnant.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like having that moment, just taking everything in. And I'm like, I need to accomplish a couple more things before I bring a child into this world. Well, not when my wife brings him into the world. So that's like, I watched it happen, and thank God that wasn't me. That's all I'm going to say. She's a tough cookie. Wow. Everybody told me not to watch it. And I was like, no, I got to see it. And I did, and it was worth it. But oh my God, I love her. Thank God she did that. Not for me. But, so I was just having that moment, like I need to accomplish a couple of more things. because I didn't want to be one of those people that was like, and I've heard it so many times. I'm sure you've heard it too. You know, people go, "Oh, I used to do all this, and then I had a kid."
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be like that, you know. And I had already been pretty successful, like, you know, editor at NBC. I've written, I'd written for over 30 publications and all this cool stuff. But I'm like, how could I teach journalism for over a decade and not have a book? Never write a book. Like, I just never gotten around to it. And I think I was like too busy making other people look good, you know. And I was still young, 33.
Yeah.
So I remember my initial thought was like, I want to do something really cool that I'm proud of. So I went to the head of the journalism program at my college. I'm like, why don't we add a multimedia journalism course to our course offerings? And I want to teach it. I've taught it at other colleges before. Like, let's like reinvent this program for like the new millennium and stuff. And he had tenure and stuff. And he was just like, yeah, no. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like, so I'm going to write a book. And he's just like, go write a book, kid. So I went home. I'm sitting in my man cave, surrounded by like 3,000 games. I'm just pulling games out. I'm like, I know who created these games. There's stories behind these games that isn't on Reddit, that's not on Wikipedia. I'm gonna send pitches out to these like 5 or 6 developers. So then I say to myself, if half of them get back, then I have the beginning of a book. So this was on Halloween of 2016. So now within a week, all 6 answer me and they say yes. So I'm like, yeah. So now fast forward a couple weeks to Thanksgiving, like end of November, I have all 6 chapters written already because I'm like gung ho. This is like, my wife is sleeping. So now she's a little bit more pregnant because we had Thanksgiving dinner and stuff. So now I'm sitting on the couch by myself. I'm like, just me, the dog, and the cat, you know? And I'm like, you know what? Let me start pitching this book to publishers. 3 days after I sent the pitches, McFarlane got back to me. So like I sent the pitches on Thanksgiving. So it's like a national holiday. So you got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Like no one's answering emails at that time, you know? Monday morning, I wake up and they're like, yeah, we're interested. So that was 6 books ago.
That's
with
amazing.
them. Yeah, it's been crazy. And then, you know, the books led into like the voice acting and like it's been super, super crazy. So that's how the books started, just me wanting to get some stuff off my bucket list, but then also to combine 2 of my favorite things in the world, which is video games and interview journalism. Like I love doing interviews.
Are there any people that you've still yet to get in terms of sort of people to interview for a book, and any that you're still thinking, I really want that person?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it's just like I joke around with people a lot of the times, and I say that like my books are almost like kind of like a tribute to like North American and European game developers. Because like, I mean, I've interviewed so many, you know, English developers and like Australian developers and Swedish and, you know, Finnish, but mostly like American and Canadian. There's so many Japanese developers that I would love to speak to that are on my hit list. But they're so humble and they look at it so differently. Like it's like if you talk to, stereotypically speaking, of course, the English are amazing storytellers. They love to tell a story and they love to give you all of the details. So it's like, I spoke to Nick Cusworth, who did the Croc series for PlayStation. I got like more info than I could ever use. It was so great speaking to him. 45 minutes and it was just like, I knew everything. I've spoken to Dylan Cuthbert, who programmed the original Star Fox. Amazing stories of like eating McDonald's late at night with like the, you know, the creator of Super Mario Brothers and stuff like that. Like amazing stories. Japanese developers are kind of like, it was my job to make the game. I made it to the best of my ability and I moved on. And you're like, how am I supposed to fill a chapter like that? You know, can you give me more? And it's really hard. So, but then those are the ones that say yes. Most of them don't answer. And I'm used to that. I mean, I've probably, for the 7 books, I've interviewed probably like 300 developers. And I mean, I've probably got like 700 pitches out there that haven't been answered yet. you know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so there's a lot of Japanese developers that I would love to get a hold of, you know, like the big ones. Nintendo, they were cute with me. The first book, I wanted to have an interview with Tajiri-san, who created Pokemon. It's one of my favorite franchises. And I emailed Nintendo and I'm like, this is what I'm doing. They send me like a 40-page PDF of pretty much like every fact you would ever want to know about Pokemon, which is great. It's great for background. But I'm like, guys, the chapters aren't structured that way. I need quotes. I need him to tell me like his stories, like the questions you guys are asking me now.
Yeah.
That's how the chapters are set up, you know? So just like, I'm not going to take those things off of Wikipedia and Reddit. Like they need to be reported. Like the book needs to feel differently. It needs to have original reporting. And they were like, yeah, well, this is all we could do for you. So definitely one day I would love to have a Japanese only developer book. I would also one day love to have a female only book, because there's so many females out there that have done great work that haven't gotten the credit that they deserve. So, you know, that's the best thing about this series. It's just like I can go like in any direction, like maybe like the minds behind the indie games, minds behind the 80s games, minds behind and I could pick another console. Like there's just so many different ways.
It's endless, really. They've got loads of different areas.
A lifetime's work for you, definitely, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go
on, Matt, go on.
I was just going to say, you mentioned, and certainly anyone that follows you on sort of social media would have seen it, you mentioned your game collection of sort of, is 3,000 the current?
Yeah, about in between, like probably like almost 31 now, you know. So
wow, which is
I went shopping
incredible.
A couple of weeks ago.
Is that something that's been with you since is that your sort of childhood collection? Just
so I haven't
continued.
Yeah, I haven't traded in anything since I'm 14 years old.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like I hang out in video game stores all the time, especially like in my area. They know me, and every time I see a little kid come in and he wants to trade in like FIFA 18, I'm like, you're gonna get like $3 for this, and I'm like, you played this game for hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
Keep the $3. You know, keep the game. You know, and the thing is too, I'm a fan of physical media. I mean, I have tons, and like if I showed you guys my Switch, I probably have like 500 like downloaded games on my Switch.
Yeah.
And plus I get so many review codes. I get so many games to review that like most of them I don't even get a chance to review, you know. So I love having games digitally as well, but it's just like there's something to me to be said having a game complete in box, instruction manual, the whole 9 yards. Like to me it's just like it's good times. You know. So I love, like, I tell my daughter all the time when we're in the man cave joking around, I'm like, you know, one day it's all gonna be yours, you could do whatever you want with it, you know. And it's just like, I mean, it's probably there's some games in there that are worth a ton of money. But it's just like I have it there because it's just like historical. First off, I think it's like there's a historical value in it. And then two, it's just like I could pick out any game from a shelf and just be like, I bought this on this day because I was feeling like this, and da 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 da. So it's just like it's just taking a look at myself in a different way, you know.
That's amazing. That's amazing. To have that sort of number of games is incredible.
Oh yeah, I remember the first time my wife saw it. She was just like, it was like that movie 40-Year-Old Virgin. She was just kind of like, you know, like, why do you have this many games, you know? So, but
do you collect particular types? Like, are you a completist that you'll think, I want all these games or all this genre or all this type? What is there any formula to it?
None. So it's just like, it's so funny. I think I have every NHL game from Electronic Arts.
Sure.
That's like, I have pretty much every Pokemon game. I have probably like 500 PS2 games.
Wow.
I probably have like 500 PS1 games, because those were like my two consoles, like that I was a real consumer for like the first time. I like to pick up games that have stories, so I'll give you guys like a quick example. This happens all the time at my friend's video game store that I hang out in all the time. I'll pick out a game and I'll be like, this is $2. And he'll go, yeah. And I'm like, well, you know, the producer on this game actually ended up like developing this game like 15 years later. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah. So I'll buy it. And then like a week later, I'll go back there and the same game will be like $13. You know? And I'll be like, oh, what happened? And he goes, oh man, it's like, I didn't think it was worth that much, blah, 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 blah. I didn't know that there was a story behind it. So that's what I do. I like to buy games that, like, when my nieces and nephews come into the man cave, I could be like, oh, you know this game? You know who did this? Like, da 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 da. Like, so I'm just like, I'm a geek for stuff like that. So that's kind of like how I buy games. I bought a bunch of Famicom games last week, just because like the covers were weird. It was like a bunch of kids like dressed in like kabuki makeup, and I was like, what the hell is this? And the guy was like, I don't even know the name of it. And I went on Instagram and I said, does anybody know the name of this game? And somebody commented, and I found out about it and stuff. So it's just like, that's, you know, that's kind of like what I do.
The Famicom games have the cool packaging. Was it in the longer box?
The Super
nice
Famicom games have those beautiful boxes. Oh, I have quite a bit of wrestling games, Japanese wrestling games for the Super Famicom, like the Fire Pro games that didn't really get any traction in the States, but like in Japan, they're just amazing. Like the Suda 51 stuff with the suicide ending, and like, oh, it's so good.
If anyone sees your content that you post on social media, a lot of it is kind of retro gaming clips that you'll do and videos. Is the retro stuff your kind of favourite era of gaming, or are you still gaming in the current games, PS5s, Xbox? I still play a lot of current games. I just bought a couple of Switch games the other day, so I'm playing like Pokemon Snap now with my daughter and stuff. I haven't gotten a PS5 yet, but I plan on it. I don't feel like there's enough games for it right now, especially like one of my friends got it for Christmas, and I remember we went to GameStop and he bought a whole bunch of PS4 games for it, so I was just kind of like, you know. But like seeing like Returnal looks pretty cool. There's a couple of really cool games on there, so like eventually I am going to get a PS5. I have quite a bit of PS4 games. I have quite a bit of Switch games. It's just when you have kids, the Switch is so good because you can just take it wherever you want. I don't think I've ever docked my Switch on the TV, you know. My wife went out overnight for like her birthday, like celebration, all the girls and stuff like that. They went out girls' night and stuff, so I was home and I had like an opportunity to just sit down and play PS4 for like a half hour, and I was like 10 minutes in and both my kids woke up. So I was just like, the Switch though, I could lay in the bed, they fall asleep, I got one over here, and I could still play Animal Crossing. So it's just like, or like I have an RG350, which is just like this little pocket emulator that I have like 40,000 games on from like the PS1 backwards. And that's just, for me, it's like the ultimate like research device. Like if somebody's like, oh, did you play that in the arcade? I can go down the emulator and be like, I have the ROM. Okay. You know, and just play it. And if I like it, contact the developer and start the whole process of trying to get them in a book and stuff. So that's kind of like how I game now. It's like, it's a job in a way, you know? So I still enjoy it though. It's still a ton of fun. But yeah, I play everything, to answer your question. Well, it leads to a good point that you bring it up, because it's time for a returning segment to our show, which is...
Question mark. Hi, gentlemen. Glad that the series is back. My question is about the Nintendo Switch. I literally just read just now that the Switch has now outsold the Xbox 360. And really, I just wanted to know your opinion on the Switch. I know James doesn't have one. I'm not sure about Matt or your guest. And I suppose if you haven't got a Switch, why not? What are your opinions and thoughts on the Switch as a console? Cheers.
Matt, what are your thoughts on the Switch?
I absolutely love it. I mean, it's the thing with it, as Pat just said. I mean, the whole flexibility is the way I'd sort of word it of it. And I remember when the first preview videos came out of it, and there was like some 4 people sitting there, and then they got a controller each, and you know, you can play with 2 controls, or you can give someone else a controller, and you know, just that flexibility of the fact you've got this device, you can play it on the TV, or you can play it as a handheld, or you can play it 2-player, and you don't have to invest in another controller. It's fantastic from that point of view, and the quality, I think, from this generation of console, the quality of the games that Nintendo have brought to it, and like still using their existing properties, the quality is fantastic. Like the Mario Odyssey was an incredible game, and the tennis game they did, and the Mario Kart that's on there, all of them are, brilliant. It's the thing. The only thing that I would say with it is, and I think this is just more of a general Nintendo thing, I think Nintendo has such an amazing legacy of games. And the good thing they do is, if you're a sort of an online, I can't remember what they call it. Is it just Nintendo Online?
Yes,
sort of
Nintendo
Sony,
Online service.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They give you a selected sort of amount of NES games and Super Nintendo games and things like that on there, which is brilliant. And that's probably the most that I play on there, is a bit like you said, if I get a moment to look at it, I would then sort of, when the kids are doing something else, I'll think, oh, I really want to play Double Dragon 2 or something like that I remember. I think, oh, brilliant, and sort of playing that. But I just think that Nintendo are sitting on this absolute treasure trove of titles, and they should just get them out there in the world, because you see a lot of sort of projects where people, it's like in the Mario 64 and things like that, they're sort of doing themselves and getting them out there, and just get them out there, really. But the device itself, brilliant, but I don't think I would ever have it as my main console, is what I'd say. I'd love it, but I love my Xbox more.
Do you think I'll ask this to Pat, do you think Nintendo, I mean, the big selling point with the Switch is the fact that it can either be on a dock and on your TV, or you're picking it up and you can play it as you would a Game Boy, or going back to old school Nintendo stuff. Do you think Nintendo could compete in the gaming world if it was just a standalone console up against PlayStation and Xbox now?
So I've told people this before. Without the Game Boy, Nintendo does not exist anymore as a publisher of consoles. The Game Boy lit the video game industry on fire. The Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, the Nintendo DS, the Nintendo 3DS, those consoles kept Nintendo in business. Yeah. Because the only thing that kept them in the console industry, and that continues to keep them in the console industry, is their amazing first-party titles. They have an arsenal of first-party titles: Mario, Zelda, Kirby, Pokemon, that Xbox, Sony, they'll never have. Yeah. So people will come back for those regardless of the systems that they're on. But the Wii was like a giant tech demo of a system that just managed to get pop culturally relevant, and it was in old age homes and stuff like that. But it had one of the worst libraries of games. There's so much awful third-party garbage on the Wii, but it had great first-party games. You know, the Wii U, disaster. So the Switch is like, it took the mistake that was the Wii U, because I'm sure if you look at the Wii U and you look at the Switch, you're like, this is like the same thought. Yeah. But the Switch is the finished, completed thought. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me, the Switch is an amazing console. I love it. It's not my main console either. Right now, the PS4 is, and it's because the PS4 has a hockey game and a wrestling game. For me, Nintendo's inability to work out something with Electronic Arts to get like a legit hockey game on there, their inability to work with Sony to get a real baseball game on there, because if the show can be on Xbox, why can't Santa Monica Studio put it on Switch? I guarantee you it would sell 1 million copies. You know, so it's just like little things like that make it not my go-to console. But I mean, I spend hundreds of hours playing the new Pokemon, hundreds of hours playing Animal Crossing. I spent over 100 hours playing a far less solid version of Outer Worlds because I wanted to play it on the go. But then you have other companies that, like the Witcher game on the Switch, they optimized it for the Switch, and it actually plays pretty well, you know? So it's essentially like a handheld Xbox 360 when you think about it. You know, I think it's a beautiful device. Mine still works fantastic. I haven't got any controllers that drift. So many people have told me that their controllers drift after a while.
I did. Yeah.
You know, it happens to a lot of people. But I don't think that they could ever truly compete like home console versus home console. But this is the thing. They've proven that they don't have to.
Yeah.
You know, so when you're successful, you find ways to adapt and to reinvent the recipe, the formula, the game, so to speak. And Nintendo has basically said, we don't need to have all the best sports games. We don't need to have the best third-party licenses, because people will play a new Mario game if it's on a roll of toilet paper.
Yeah.
So we're going to make sure that we give you a device that you can enjoy our games in the best way possible. And I think they've done that again this console generation.
They really have.
Yeah. I mean, my thoughts on it are that I think it's more a time. One thing that you both have mentioned is having the time to commit to it. I mean, I've recently got a PS5, which I've fought tooth and nail to get, and I barely have enough time to play on that, especially with my little boy who wants to play on it as well all the time. But I imagine as he gets older, the appeal of a handheld console, whether you know the Switch is a Switch 2 or whatever it will be in years' time when newer versions come out, it could potentially be the point where we get one of them. But I think the concept of it, and we've played one. A friend of ours has got one at work who brought it in after he picked it up pretty early after release and played Mario Kart, which is for me still one of the best games. You know, from growing up, I was a Nintendo. First console I had was the NES, and then I had the SNES and so forth, and then moved on to PlayStations. So it brings back a lot of nostalgia for me, all them games. So yeah, I think just an amazing bit of kit, and the fact that there is the option to dock it and have it on your big screen as well is
super
incredible.
smart.
Yeah, really.
And I
incredible.
think some of the games on it as well that are probably sort of, I don't know whether underappreciated is necessarily the case with them, but the games such as like 1-2 Switch, which I don't know whether you've played, which is sort of like a party game thing. And it really shows the capability of things like the controllers. There's a game where you hold the controller like this and you have to work out how many marbles are in the box. And you tilt it and you can feel marbles in a box. And it's just insane. You're sort of like this thinking, like you're trying to count them. And that is... And James recently has been talking about the PS5 controller, and it's like
with the feedback,
it's feeling the haptic feedback in that, and that's fantastic. I do wonder where they'll take it though. Sort of what the next evolution of the sort of Switch will be.
It's funny too that like we're talking about all this cool technology and how it originated with Nintendo, but it really didn't. I'm not sure if you guys know this story, but Dominic Craig, who was one of the level designers on Red Dead Revolver, he also worked on the iToy for the PlayStation 2. And he told me a story of at like E3, Miyamoto was playing with the iToy, and he went over to another Nintendo exec and was like, why are we not doing something like this? Like this is something that we would do, not them. You know? So we know the iToy was a success, but it wasn't a massive success. And then you're talking like a year and a half later, the Wii is out, using the camera, doing all of those same things, you know? So it's pretty crazy stuff.
Have you got a favourite console that you've ever owned?
I'd have to say there's probably like 3. So the PlayStation 1, just because it was like the first console that I remember actively buying games with, like with money that I earned. PlayStation 2, because I have like, that's the system that I have the most games for. But then I will always have a soft spot for the original Game Boy, because I remember putting on the magnifying glass and the light and sitting in my bunk bed playing Pokemon Blue and playing Mario Land and Kirby. You know, still to this day, I still remember playing Kirby and beating it for the first time, and you know, and then like the screen would start to get light because the battery was about to die, so you're adjusting the contrast to try and get like another 15 minutes of gameplay. Like those are probably like my 3 favorite systems.
It's funny, I remember doing exactly the same thing.
Have you got a favorite one ever, Matt? GameCube?
No, Super Nintendo would probably be mine, and that's more to be honest, that's more of a nostalgia thing rather than anything else. I mean, that was probably the one, bit like you said, the one that I remember being that age. I was absolutely just engrossed in this thing, and then playing Super Mario World, which is still probably my favourite out of the Mario games, and F-Zero and Star Fox and all of these sort of titles.
Street Fighter 2 as well.
And Street Fighter 2, exactly. Going out and it coming out in the US and getting a US cartridge and getting the adapter and plugging it in the top, and that first moment of having Street Fighter 2 in my house was just incredible, and I absolutely love that console. So yeah, that would be mine, I would say. What about you, James?
Yeah, I mean, SNES was the first one. I mean, as I say, I had the NES, but the SNES was pretty special. Just for a console, it just felt like such a big leap from the NES as well. Even though I've got the mini one, which still blows my mind a bit that we're playing these and having that kind of all the memories come flooding back. But yeah, probably the PlayStation 1 actually, because we're talking about jumps. That was huge.
Yeah.
That was huge.
And that felt like a grown-up console. And I know certainly in the UK, I don't know whether in the US, it was marketed as a grown-up thing. It wasn't, and I would have been about 18 maybe when it came out. I don't know. And it was almost like you're old, you're that level of maturity, but it's okay. You can have a PlayStation where it's like, well, and the Nintendo, I'm a bit too old for a Nintendo, but a PlayStation, that's fine. I can have it. That was sort of the thought of it then.
I can't remember whether PlayStation as well was the first, or it must have been one of the earlier ones where all of a sudden kind of age ratings for games were introduced as well. Because I can't ever remember a game on the SNES that was for an 18. Do you know what I mean?
So there's a chapter in the first book about Night Trap, where Night Trap, Primal Rage, Mortal Kombat, Lethal Enforcers, Doom, those were like the 5 or 6 games that like led to the creation of the ESRB.
Yeah.
So at the tail end of the Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo era, that's when you started to see games get rated. So not pretty much, every PlayStation game has a rating on it. Yeah. But I would probably say there's probably the last like 9th or 8th of the games on the Super Nintendo and Genesis have ratings on them.
Actually, I remember seeing that on that documentary, Matt, that we watched on Netflix.
The Netflix one?
Yeah.
High Score?
High Score, yeah.
Was it called High Score?
Yeah, and they talked about that with Mortal Kombat, because that was obviously what was competing at the time with a lot of games. But yeah. Moving away from gaming, you're also a writer for your own comic book as well, which is another incredible story, which is Condry, is it?
Yeah, Condry. Yeah.
Which is brilliant.
Matt,
we've read
it. We've read it. So
fantastic.
That's really good.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's we just finished lettering issue 1, which is a little bit longer. So we're doing like 4 mini issues this year, and then 2022 we're gonna start doing like more traditional, longer stories. But I mean, way before I started college, like right after my car accident that I told you about, I bought my first computer, and I started writing it. I was 18 years old, and I wrote probably like 10 full issues. It's like a pretty big chunk of comic, and started trying to find an artist. And we're talking, this is almost 20 years ago. This is like AOL days, you know. And I went through like 3 different artists, and they all like I knew the way that I wanted the comic to look. I wanted it to look very noir, gritty, and I just couldn't find the right person. So then I kind of shelved it, and I started writing journalistically and covering professional sports and covering the video game industry. And then it's like every 4 or 5 years, I would come back to it, and I would tighten the narrative more, and I'd work on it for like a month or 2, and I'd be like, this is so good, why can't I find an artist? And then the end of like 2018, early 2019, I just put a message on Facebook, and I'm like, I need an artist. I have something that's really good. And my friend Tommy introduced me to Kieran, and we ended up putting something together. We finished at like the end of the summer of 2019, and then we started polishing it, and then we started pitching people, and then COVID. So then I got answers back from places like Image and Dark Horse, and they were like, you know, we're not really accepting anything from any like first-time comic book authors and artists and stuff. So the way it ended up happening is Mark Burnell from Lesser Known messaged me on Instagram, and he wanted me to interview him so he could talk about his comic book company that he had just started. So I did the interview, shared the hell out of it, got him a lot of traffic, and he was like, thank you. And I was like, I think I got something for you. And sent it to him, and like an hour later, he's like, yeah, we need to talk. And he fell in love with Kieran's art. I think I sold him on the story a little bit later. But that was like, that's how it all started. And I'm super excited. My entire life as a person and as a writer, I tried to pride myself on being a finisher, like starting something and finishing it. I grew up in a family with drug and alcohol issues, like both sides, and it was like two sides of family that was like all dreamers, people that could have been this, people that could have been that, people that were smart enough to do this but didn't do that. And I was just like, I wrote a book, I turned it into a series. I wanted to be a voice actor. I made that happen. And now it's like, this was like the last thing on the table that like needed to get done. I mean, there's other things that I would like to do. You know, I was in bands before. I would like to like maybe one day like release an album or something like that. I would love to wrestle one match against somebody. You know, like there's a whole bunch of, I'm out of my mind, you know, but for the most part, I mean, the books, the voice acting, and the comic, it's like, those are like the 3 biggest like creative things I've ever wanted to get done. And I was telling Kieran this the other day, but it's like when you guys read like the next issues, you're going to start to see other characters come in to this comic and play a role in Condry's life. And it's just like people like Frank Miller and Mike Mignola, they've played like a huge role on me creatively. And a lot of these characters that I'm introducing, they can totally have their own standalone series. Like I'm not just like telling the story of like one character. Like I'm actively like building a universe, and I've been actively building a universe for like 20 years and nobody knew. So now it's just like, now that people are starting to get to see it, is really cool. And like I have like 2 signings this month, and then we're doing a signing on Free Comic Book Day. So there's just like so many. And like I said, I can't say enough for how awesome it's been to be a part of like the Lesser Known comics umbrella. Everyone's so nice, and you know, it's great the way everything turned out.
Well, I mean, me and Matt said straight away afterwards how cool the artwork is in there, and you're right, it is very. The story itself is gritty, it's dark. Just that initial introduction that you get, and I said to Matt at the end of it, I said, I want to know more, and that's what you want from a comic every time. And there's so many similarities here. A good friend of mine who, much like yourself, has been sitting on an idea since he was young, since me and him grew up together, and it's something that he's always talked to me about. And it was only a couple of years ago that he managed to get his comic book made and published, and we had him on the show. We spoke to him, and I'll have to share that with you so you can check it out. But just seeing that is such a proud moment for him, and I can see that as his friend, and just from the way you're talking about it, it sounds exactly the same.
Yeah, it's been it's been crazy. It's like last week, like the physical came out, and the first thing I did was like put it in a frame, and Kieran came over and he signed it, and I'm just like, oh, and it's like I was hanging out with the guy that introduced the both of us yesterday, and I gave him his comic and stuff, and he was just like, whatever happens now, you can say that you did it,
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, the first goal was to get it published, and I'm like, that's done. So I'm like, the next goal is everything that I wrote, those 10 issues, all of that content, that needs to see the light of day.
Yeah.
Like that needs to get out, and then after that, then I'll see what happens. I want to continue it. I want to write books. I want to write comics. I want to continue to voice act. I want to, I've actually written a story for a video game that's in development right now with Pete Paquette, who was the senior animator on BioShock Infinite. And he's also worked on Overwatch and Madden and stuff. So that's like something I want to see happen. Like in a perfect world, one day I'd like to wake up, get some coffee with my kids, go to the video game store, show them a game that I worked on in the store, then go to a bookstore and show them a book that I wrote, and then go to the comic book store and show them a comic that I worked on. That would be, if I could do all of that in one day, then I'm good. I'm getting there. It's going to happen. So, and I just think this character too has like so much potential to be like more than just a comic book character. Like, I totally think that this would be able to work as like a television show. Like you look at The Boys and how gritty they were able to get on Amazon. I mean, I think like this would totally work, and then I have so many friends in the video game industry that like I look at amazing comic book inspired video games like The Darkness, and I'm like, this could totally work in like the same vein, so I mean, like I said, I'm crazy. There's so much that I want to do. I just hope I live long enough to do it all, so.
Well, you've achieved so much already, so the potential is always there, and it sounds like you're committed to trying to achieve them dreams. So we may see that. We may see your comic become a hit TV series. We may see you in a wrestling ring. So.
It's funny though too, because it's like one of the signings that I'm doing at the end of the month. I'm actually going to be the ring announcer for the main event at a wrestling show, so I'm going to do like a signing like during the wrestling show, like during intermission and stuff. And then since I'm a voice actor and stuff like that, I'm going to be like, and in this corner, blah, blah, like on the, so that's going to be like another like checkbox, like to be in the ring and be the ring announcer. I'll be wearing like a nice suit. I'll be like, it's going to, I mean, we're giving out comics to like all the people in the front row, so it's just like the thought of me being in the front row doing like the ring announcing and then all these people holding up my comic, I'm just like, you can't ask for better than that.
That'd be amazing. That'd be amazing. Well, if you are listening or watching this show, we will put the link for your comic in all the description, so people make sure you go and check it out. You've touched upon your voice acting as well. Tell us a little bit about the stuff that you've done with that.
So, the way that happened was just wild. So, I finished the first book. So I've never stopped writing for reviewfix.com. That's my site. I own it. I manage like a nice team of writers, and we produce a ton of stuff. So after the first book came out, I started slowly getting answers from people that didn't make the first book. So I was thinking about doing a sequel, but I was still doing active video game journalism. So I came across this game on Twitter called The Padre. Kind of looked like Minecraft, like a survival horror game that looked like Minecraft. And it was just like this Catholic priest walking with like a torch. It looked really cool. So I messaged the developer and I asked for an interview. So we did an interview, got them a lot of traffic. Then he asked me if I wanted to play the game. I was like, sure. So I started playing the game, totally like shades of Alone in the Dark. Old school survival horror point and click game. I was totally hooked, but being a point and click game, it's heavy on text, and there was plenty of typos. So being a journalism professor and an English professor for 15 years, I told them, I'm like, guys, you need somebody to come in there and just,
clean it up,
scrub it up, I'm like, because the gameplay is there, the music is there, and they're like, do you want to do it? And I was like, all right. So we thought we went back and forth. We came up with a price, and I did it. And then they had my edits in like the same day on Steam early access. So it was like they were just as passionate as I am. They wanted the game to be solid. So I thought that was it. I got paid. I was like, just credit me as a dialogue editor in the game. You know, they paid me. We were good to go. And like 2 weeks later, I get like another like 2,000 words of text. And I'm like, oh. And they're like, yeah, like we're going to keep doing this. And I'm like, okay. So now we're getting ready to go to Kickstarter. And they're like, we need you to edit the whole Kickstarter. And I'm like, oh my God, it's a lot of pressure. You know, yeah. I'm like, all right, let's do it. So now like 2 weeks, we're like, now I got the Kickstarter all pretty sexy. Everything looks good. And Bence, the lead developer, he messages me and he's like, the voice actor left. And I'm like, what, like the voice actor? Like the main character? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, why? And he's like, oh, he had some family things going on and stuff like that. And I was like, well, to be honest, he wasn't that good. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, it's supposed to be like a survival horror game. And he sounds like Russell Brand. It's just like, you know, a wacky Englishman, you know, walking around, you know, it's like, whoa, you know, it wasn't scary.
Yeah.
It wasn't scary. And the game's lighting is scary. It's like the music, like this piano in the background. It was just like so perfect. And every time I would hear this guy talk, I would go like, oh.
Yeah.
Just didn't fit.
It didn't fit. And since I've edited every single line of dialogue, and I wrote quite a bit in the game too, I just felt like a really strong connection to the character. And I was like, let me audition. And they're like, okay. They're like, we didn't know that you could do voices. And I'm just like, yeah. So I've always been good at that, like the movie preview voice, you know? Like,
in a world, one man, one tortilla, rated PG-13.
You know,
good.
And
as he could, right? It sounds like it's coming out of someone else.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And my wife hates it. She's just like, she's over it. Like one of our first dates.
She's packing the bags now. She can.
Yeah, she's packing the bags. So, but I'm like, I can't do that voice for this game because that would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what if I combine that, you know, wacky Englishman, you know, wow, and that. So
a bloke came across this dark voice. My name is Alexander, and I am the portrait. You know, here on The Week in Metropolis.
You know, and
Brilliant.
they ate it up. They ate it up. So then they're like, can you record like all 4,000 lines of dialogue like today?
Wow.
So the thing is, now I can do the voice like in and out.
Yeah.
But to find it that day, man, like I was coughing up. I was literally coughing up blood. My throat felt so burnt. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I went in and I did it. And later that night, everything was in. We updated the trailer on the Kickstarter to get that guy's voice out of there. And we ended up not getting, absolutely, like, get out of here. We ended up not getting funded on Kickstarter, which sucked. But I mean, I had done so many podcasts that we had so much buzz, and we got picked up by a publisher. So the game came out and it's on Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, PS4, Steam. And this February, the sequel came out, The Padre One Shell Straight to Hell. And that's just on Steam right now. But so I mean, to star in one video game, that's like a dream come true.
Yeah.
To star in two, that's awesome. And then I've done narration for a couple of other games, a couple of other indie games. And because of NDAs, I can't really discuss, but I've done voice acting for like 5 more games that are on the way. I've written quite a bit for an upcoming RPG. I've written a whole bunch of side quests for an upcoming RPG that I'm really excited about that I can't talk about right now. But my whole journey in the video game industry started off because of journalism and because of my writing ability. And then because I wasn't scared when I saw the tiniest opportunity to take advantage of it. And then it was just like, after the first Padre came out, like, haters are so funny, you know. It's like they think that they can do everything that you do, and it's like, especially now, I have so many friends and so many people coming in, they're like, oh, well, I've been working on a comic, like, can you talk to like your boss for me and stuff? And I'm just like like, I just got my foot in the door, like, you know, like, I'm trying to, like, you know, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't a one-hit wonder. Like, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just in the Padre. So I would go on Discord and Twitter, and I would find all of these games that didn't have any voice actors. And I literally told them, I'm like, let's do business. And they're like, oh, well, we can only pay you like, $500 or whatever. And I'm like, that's fine. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I want some credits under my belt. I want to work with you. I want to understand, so
you've got to start somewhere, haven't you? That's the thing. You can't just go in and go, I want top dollar.
Yeah.
I've only done you've got to build your way up, and you build a reputation.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's how it all started. So, I don't want to say that like my voice acting stuff is on the back burner right now. It's definitely not. I'm doing VO, like I said, on a couple of different games right now, but the books and the comic have kind of like taken over for the time being. I would never turn down a booking for voice acting. It's something that I love doing. It's just right now, like the thought of this comic still a reality, like I'm still in shock that after like 20 years, like this has happened. And I've gotten such great feedback from the books, and the minds behind the PlayStation 2 books right now is just coming along so great. Last week I interviewed the producer of NBA Street Volume 2, and he just gave me like so many amazing stories. And then I spoke to the producer of Medal of Honor Frontline and the first Call of Duty. So it's just like to get all that stuff in the book is going to be amazing. So it's just like every time I feel like maybe the comic is like number one, I get some stuff from the book. And then every time I feel like the book might be number one, then I get letters back from the comic. So it's just like this constant back and forth, which is a good thing.
Well,
absolutely.
Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Where can people find you on social media and your website and so forth?
So you can go on Instagram on Patrick Hickey Jr. That's my preferred form of social media. I love Facebook and I use Facebook, but like Instagram for me is just like chain of consciousness. Like I'll post like 50, 60 things a day. It's just like, oh, this game popped into my head, or oh, remember when this happened? And just like cool stuff. So Instagram, Patrick Hickey Jr. On Twitter, I'm at ReviewFixPat. If you're interested in buying any of the books, they're available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, wherever fine books are sold. Plenty of outlets in the UK as well. However, I will say the best place to buy the book if you really want to support me is patrickhickeyjr.com. I will pack your order. I will sign your book. I put cool stuff in people's books all the time, like trading cards and things like that. One of my readers, this was like 2 months ago, admitted to me in an email that they had never played John Madden football, like ever in their entire life. So I had an extra copy of the original John Madden on Sega Genesis, and I just put it in the book. Put it in the and they when they got it, they're like, "How much was this?" I'm like, "It's not worth anything, but it's the first Madden." So it's just like, he's like, I don't even have a Genesis. I was like, well, I would get a Genesis.
Don't send him one of them.
No.
That's in the next book.
Yeah. So like, if you want to support me, patrickhickeyjr.com. Also, Condry Zero is free digitally on lesserknowncomics.com. You can also read Mark Burnell's Lesser Known Comics #1 as well. So you get 2 free comics on there for free right now. We're currently working on batch 2, which is going to have a whole slew of like lesser known comics in there, and Condry #1. And I promise you, if you liked the way Condry Zero ended, Condry issue 1 is going to like totally blow your mind. Like, I love it. I think it's better than Zero. So go to lesserknowncomics.com. We're also in the middle of a Kickstarter. So you can go on the Kickstarter to get print copies. Right now, the only way to get print copies of the comics is to go to a signing or to go to a comic book store that we have an agreement with. It's mostly in the United States right now. I apologize. But if you sign up for the Kickstarter and like the rewards are as low as like $10, you can get a copy of Condry and Lesser Known 1. And there you go.
Thank you very much. Well, we will.
Thank you so much.
We will plug all the channels, and thanks once again for joining us.
Yeah, no problem, man. It was my pleasure. You guys are awesome.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Don't forget, if you did enjoy it, please like, subscribe on whatever platform you're watching and listening on, because in that way you won't miss out on any future episodes we put out.
Yeah, and don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms as well. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, give us a follow, and you'll be able to keep up to date with all of the latest episodes and posts that we put out there. But thank you for listening and watching.
And we'll see you next episode.